away the right to abortion in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision. In this decision, the Supreme Court overturned the right of American people to make decisions about their own bodies and their own health. That is why 1 year ago, I filed the Right to Contraception Act with my colleagues, Senators Duckworth, Hirono, and Baldwin, and Murray, and I stood here, much like I am today, to request unanimous consent to pass our legislation. The House of Representatives passed the bill by a bipartisan vote of 220 to 195 at that time. Unfortunately, Republicans in this chamber chose to block its passage. Here is just a short list of what has befallen us since that time. District court judges have blocked teens from accessing birth control at federally funded clinics and taken aim at health insurance coverage for contraception. Extremist state legislators have restricted, criminalized, and stigmatized reproductive care, including by suspending payments for emergency contraception for survivors of sexual assault. And people are left paying more, traveling further, and working harder to get essential medication. The threats to contraception are real and happening now. So I stand here today, once again, to invite every member of the Senate to join me, Senator Duckworth, Senator Hirono, Senator Baldwin, Senator Murray, and the 35 additional co-sponsors to pass the Right to Contraception Act. Because co-sponsoring this bill means that you support codifying the right to obtain and use contraception, enshrining Supreme Court precedent into federal law, guaranteeing a healthcare provider's right to prescribe these products and services and to share information related to them, preventing the federal government and states from interfering with the right to contraception, and authorizing the United States Attorney General, healthcare providers, and all Americans harmed by unlawful restrictions to go to court to enforce the rights this bill establishes, because there is no right without a remedy. Passing the Right to Contraception Act means setting the bare minimum standard that the right to contraception should be protected, even if the Supreme Court once again overturns settled precedent. 9 in 10 Americans support the right to contraception. This is not just a moral duty, but part of our duty to represent the will of the American people. The right to contraception is central to life, liberty, and freedom. This is for every person who wants to live without politicians in their homes and waiting rooms, especially women, Black, brown, indigenous, LGBTQ, rural, immigrant, low-income, and disabled Americans most impacted by the failures of this Supreme Court. With the right to abortion stolen and the right to contraception now threatened, I urge my colleagues to stand with us and to pass today the Right to Contraception Act. As if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration of S. 1999 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Reserving the right to object, this bill is not about contraception, it's about abortion. The bill defines contraception as any drug, device, or biological product intended for use in the prevention of pregnancy, whether specifically intended to prevent pregnancy or for other health needs, that is approved by the FDA. The FDA has approved dangerous chemical abortion drugs that can also be used as contraceptives off-label. There is a huge difference between a drug that blocks fertilization and a drug that can end a life. This bill also includes a provision that would act as a guaranteed earmark for Planned Parenthood. Under the bill, the government cannot directly fund a health organization unless it provides abortion drugs. And finally, this bill does not respect freedom of conscience for healthcare providers. It would no longer allow for religious exemptions for organizations who have deeply held objections to providing abortions. The bill uses intentionally vague language to hide its ulterior motive of protecting access to abortion drugs. For these reasons, I object.
From Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an issue that we're going to return to. Justice Thomas, in his comment on the Dobbs decision, said that the decisions made by the Supreme Court that extended privacy rights were an overreach. This Supreme Court began with the Dobbs decision. It's very clear, because he mentioned it specifically, that the Griswold decision, the decision to, in fact, protect the right to contraception, is also now in the crosshairs of this Supreme Court. So it is imperative that we return to this floor to begin the process of passing legislation to codify this protection for Americans. I yield back to
Senator from Nevada.
Mr. President, this Saturday marks 1 year since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade at the urging of extremist politicians, upending 50 years of precedent protecting women's right to health care. In the year since that decision, half the states in our country have banned or effectively banned access to abortion. Women in those states have extremely limited options for getting the health care they need. Those who can't afford to travel have no choice but to go to other states to receive critical reproductive care. That's what happened to Lauren Hall. She and her husband were excited that she was pregnant for the first time, but then she learned that her fetus was developing without a skull, a condition that meant it wouldn't survive. This condition also increased Lauren's risk of hemorrhaging. Her doctors at home in Texas refused to help her terminate the pregnancy, so she had to travel to Seattle, where she was finally able to get the abortion care that she needed. She's currently suing the state of Texas for refusing to give her potentially life-saving medical care. Now, we knew that after the Dobbs decision, stories like Lauren's would only happen more often, and millions of women would lose the health care they need. Even before Roe fell, healthcare organizations in Nevada were prepared for an influx of women from out of state who needed abortion services. Justice Brett Kavanaugh recognized this too. In his concurring opinion, he indicated that women who have to leave their home state to get the care they need would be protected by the constitutional right to interstate travel. But we could see from miles away in Nevada that the far right would never stop plotting to roll back women's rights even further. In the last year alone, we've seen extremist Republicans try to stop women in our military from getting the health care they need. They've come after safe and effective birth control, and they've even supported a federal abortion ban to outlaw reproductive care in all 50 states. And now we're seeing far-right extremists actively work to bar women from seeking care in states outside their own. Now, let's be clear, this is about controlling women. The far right doesn't trust women to make their own health care decisions, so they think those decisions should be made by politicians instead. Well, I don't know about some of my colleagues across the aisle, but I don't think elected officials should be telling women what to do with their bodies. And neither do the vast majority of Nevadans. We are a proud pro-choice state. Back in 1990, Nevadans overwhelmingly voted to codify a woman's right to choose. And today, over 2/3 of Nevadans believe that a woman's health care decisions are between her and her doctor. And that's across all parties, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. But even though Nevada is a safe place for women who need health care, far-right Republicans living outside my state are telling women, oh, no, sorry, we're making it illegal for you to go there. This April, Idaho became the first state to make it a criminal offense for someone to help an individual travel out of state to seek an abortion. And elected officials in states like Tennessee, Texas, and Missouri are trying to punish women for leaving their state for reproductive care, as well as anyone who helps them, including their doctors or even their employers. This is why my colleagues and I are reintroducing the Freedom to Travel for Health Care Act. 1 year after Roe versus Wade was overturned, we need this bill more than ever. Our legislation reaffirms that women have a fundamental right to interstate travel and makes crystal clear that states cannot prosecute women or anyone who helps them for going to another state to get the critical reproductive care that they need. We're talking about upholding a constitutional right to allow women to travel outside their home state. Now, why do some of my anti-choice colleagues want to restrict women from moving freely between states? The answer is simple. They don't trust women to have control over their own bodies. Well, I do. And I'm going to keep doing everything in my power to protect women, not just in Nevada, but in every state across the country. We must pass the Freedom to Travel for Health Care Act. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-2053 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Utah.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, there is an obsession on the left with abortion. It's becoming all-encompassing, infecting conversations that we have in the Senate on everything from the military to the